And one day I was in Midtown and I went to a hot dog cart for lunch. And I was standing in front of the hot dog cart, and an 18-wheeler truck came and hit the hot dog cart, and the cart hit me. And I got knocked over. Yeah, I got knocked over. And I was like lying on, it's like this bizarre story. I got knocked over. It was so, yeah, that happened. So I was lying on my back and I was literally like, this is a sign from the universe that I need to make a change.
Welcome to Spark Me, a podcast for women who know life is just getting interesting.
Each week, we spark great conversations, share lived experiences, real resources, and tap into the collective wisdom that comes from learning together.
If you're looking for connection, not perfection, fresh ideas, and a community where you truly belong,
Then pull up a chair. You're in the right place. Welcome to Spark Me.
well, hello, Michelle. It's so great to see you.
You too, Liz. So good to be back together.
This is going to be a fantastic interview. Our guest today, Nora Isaacs, has such a phenomenal story. I can't wait to get into it. But can you share with our listeners a little bit of background on Nora?
I absolutely will. But before I get into her background, I just want to say Nora is also a dear friend of mine from college. And I can say personally that she is just a incredible, amazing, remarkable woman. So a little bit about her. Nora Isaacs is a writer, author, and personal historian with a lifelong passion for the power of storytelling. She holds a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism and has written hundreds of articles and essays for publications including the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, Yoga Journal, and Natural Health. She's the author of three books, and a founding member of the editorial collective, The Prose Doctors. Nora is also the founder of Backstory, which is a company that uses real conversation and human connection to help people capture their family histories and life stories in books they can pass down to future generations. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Nora Isaacs. Welcome, Nora.
Thank you so much. I am so delighted to be here.
So good to see you. This is
Me too.
it's such a treat for me. So Nora, I know, having known you for a long time, you have always had writing in your blood. And I think literally it goes back to your family. You were from a family that wrote everything down, basically. Your grandmother, your mother, your father all have these beautiful stories of writing down their lives and their stories for others. So I want to know, you grew up in a family that preserved itself through poetry and letters and essays. So what was it like inside that home? And did you understand at the time how rare that was?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think I understood at the time. I knew that stories in my family were a way to kind of pass along values. And they weren't just stories, they were kind of roadmaps to how to live, how we wanted to live our life. So the stories of the immigration story from my family coming from Ukraine and Poland, and the resilience of my ancestors coming here, starting with nothing, and then growing up, the stories that I heard. My parents are actually both therapists, so they had a lot of stories. They weren't allowed to divulge names, but they had a lot of stories, and it really opened my eyes to kind of what other people's lives were like and what other people went through. And I would say um, the main thing I learned was people's resilience and
Mm.
people's ability to kind of come back from hard things.
And how did that influence you?
Well, I always wanted to get things on the page. So I always had a journal. I have a journal when I was 8 years old. um, and I always was telling stories, and I was always an observer. So after Lafayette College, I decided to go to Columbia Journalism School. And on the first day, they gave us a token, and they said it was 9 in the morning, and they said, go find a story and come back and file it by 2. So I was very, yeah. So I went and I took my token and I went to Jackson Heights, Queens. That was my assignment. And I just ran around. I found a house fire. I talked to the people, and I came back and filed a story. And so that was kind of the beginning of my searching for stories and finding interesting things where you least expect it.
What a great exercise, right?
Yeah,
I love it. I almost want to just do that without the Columbia University telling me to do that.
totally.
What like once you went from Columbia, how did you get
Hmm.
involved in writing professionally? Walk us through that experience because
Yeah,
so many people want to do that
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
a tough thing to do.
It is, yeah. I think for me, I'm very creative, but I'm also very practical. So I thought, what's something that I can do that I can be creative and do, express myself through words, but also it's a practical, journalism. So after after Columbia, I went into the kind of like the New York Magazine publishing world, and it was the time, it was the 90s. I was in the same building as George Magazine. I used to see John on the elevator. It was a very exciting time. And at the same time, I was kind of on this track. So I started off as an editorial assistant, and then I became an assistant editor. And then I kind of saw my track, and I was like, I don't know. My editor stayed, she was there at 7 in the morning and she stayed till 10 at night. And I have nothing against hard work. I'm a very hard worker, but I kind of wanted to have more autonomy in what I did and more choice. Um, and I started to feel like I wasn't in the right place. I don't know if you guys have ever had that feeling. You're like,
Right.
something is not right.
Mhm.
And then one day I was in Midtown and I went to a hot dog cart for lunch, and I was standing in front of the hot dog cart, and an 18-wheeler truck came and hit the hot dog cart, and the cart hit me,
Oh
and I
my
got knocked
gosh.
over. Yeah, and I got knocked over. And I was like lying on it's like this bizarre story. I got knocked over. It was so yeah, that
Nora,
happened. So I
it's
was
so you though.
I know exactly. Doesn't everyone get hit by a hot dog? I was lying on my back and I was literally like, this is a sign from the universe that I need to make a change. And so I got $3,000 for my settlement, which at that time was like $3,000. Um, so I decided to move to San Francisco because I always kind of have had like an instinct for like what's next, kind of where the culture is going. And I had heard some little things about San Francisco. So I went to San Francisco with the $3,000 for my hot dog settlement. And and I was just dead smack in the .com era. And so that was just like a whole thing with the, rooftop parties, and there was these huge magazines and tons of work because they needed, they had all these advertisers and they had to fill these big magazines. So I became a tech writer. And so I really immersed myself into that world. I remember driving around Palo Alto and interviewing these like 21-year-old CEOs and doing stories on B2B chemical exchanges, like things I knew nothing about. um, so so that was what ended me up in San Francisco.
I'm hearing you say that you were like a tech writer and writing,
Yeah,
and I have this background of you writing the vid at Lafayette, right? Like
yeah, I
really,
know.
but it seems like it's an incredible testament to how you can go places where you sort of maybe didn't see your personality going, right? Tech writing
Yeah,
seems
yeah,
like, but at the same time, I think you were discovering yoga. How was that folding into
yeah.
your life at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michelle. So I was kind of getting burnt out in terms of the writing, and I've always had the question in the back of my mind, what is my purpose? What am I here for? Um, what am I, how can I best give and serve? So I started doing yoga. There was a studio. This was before yoga was, there was a studio on every corner. I started just going to a yoga studio, and I really um, felt a very strong connection to that practice and to kind of this idea that I have everything I need inside me. That's kind of you have to, you don't need to look outward for those things. So I started doing yoga, and then I found out about a job at a magazine called Yoga Journal, which is out here. And it was a very small magazine. And I thought, wow, the two things that I'm really into, yoga and writing and editorial. So I got a job at Yoga Journal. And again, that was right before yoga kind of exploded and hit. So as I started working there, yoga really became super popular on every corner. And I started writing. I remember I did a story on hybrid yoga classes. So I went to New York and I took a week and I did like yoga lattes, yoga, uh, aqua yoga, kind of like what is the meaning of yoga? So that kind of thing. So I did that for a long time and that was really great. And that was kind of the beginning of my health writing phase of my career.
Yeah. And what did you discover during that time? Like, how did it start to influence your how did what you were discovering in your personal life with yoga and that quest to find out what was inside of you influence what you were doing in your professional life?
I think it just kind of made me step back and see that, um, I don't know, it just kind of opened up unlimited possibilities. I had done this tech writing, and that wasn't really fulfilling me, and it got me closer towards my purpose because um, I've always been so fascinated with people and their stories.
And at some point, as your writing is more focused on health issues
Hmm.
for women,
Hmm.
you decided to write a book called Women in Overdrive. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Tell us what led to that and why that became such a passion for you.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of in my 30s and I saw most of the women I know were super stressed, and people were um, not engaging in practices like I had learned from yoga, which is kind of quieting down and learning how to breathe and learning how to be with yourself. And I saw kind of like an epidemic. And when I was doing the health writing, I would interview older women, and part of me was thinking, oh, by the time you're older, you've got it figured out. But then I realized that a lot of women didn't. And so, kind of decade after decade, they were just kind of in overdrive and getting burnt out um, and having resulting health problems and so on and so forth. So, I really wanted to kind of delve into that idea that you can have a great career, you can have a great family life, but you can do it from a place of not being so stressed and overdrive and kind of finding balance became a really important key for me in my life and in my work.
So part of the book came from watching your mother's generation, you said, right? And
Yeah.
aging beautifully but not slowing down.
Yeah.
Liz's umbrella almost just took a.
I know.
Uh-oh.
We almost had another hot dog truck
If
incident.
you
I know.
if you had a video camera on me right now, you would see I have like four
What's going
things trying to
on?
hold this umbrella down.
Sorry. So, part of the book came from watching your mother's generation, like I said, aging
Hmm.
beautifully, but they weren't slowing down.
Yeah.
Um, what did you see that moved you about about watching that generation? And how did that influence not just that book, but sort of your own life?
Let's see. I think that generation was very like a had like a selflessness that I appreciated, but I also felt wasn't accommodating to their own needs and what they really wanted and what they kind of, you know, were capable of. Because it was such a different time when you kind of, there was, you were a nurse, you were a teacher, and there's nothing wrong with those professions. But I think for me, it was about, seeing them and seeing people's kind of potential and what they could become. And so for our generation, reaching that potential, but not doing it in a way that is so grasping and that you're in overdrive and you don't have a balanced life.
Yeah. With your background, I mean, you said your parents
Yeah.
were therapists, right,
Yeah.
Nora? So, I mean, you that seems like to me such an advantage in life. Like everybody's now, like my son actually said to me once, I think everybody should talk to a therapist. And so you kind of
Yeah.
grew up in a culture that already had that intrinsically in it,
Yeah.
which I felt as your friend. You were always so like cool and low key and just had a way of seeing life that other people didn't. So with that and then having read or written this book about women in overdrive and with the yoga, you know, do you feel that you were sort of living what you were writing about, and what, did that all give you an advantage, and is that why you wanted to share it? And have you heard from women who read the book and were sort of moved or influenced by it?
Hmm. So yeah, I think that growing up with therapists as parents was very different from um, many other people's experiences. I remember when I was 15, I think I took the family car out and I crashed it into the house. And instead of punishing me, they had me write like a letter why I did it, and what my feelings were about it. And so I think having that kind of lens is very different from some other people's lenses. So um, that definitely gave me more of a leeway for the kind of emotional. I think the emotional sphere of life.
Mhm.
Um, so kind of coming at things uh, with that kind of that underlying thing. And I think that's kind of brings me back to stories because there's always a story. And behind a story, there's always something else behind it. And so I think that's kind of the underlying lesson that I learned from growing up with therapists as parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love this thread in your life of introspection through journaling and
Hmm.
through yoga practice,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, how, so many of our listeners are dealing with a lot of stuff, especially at this age of life, right?
Hmm.
What are some of the tools that you have learned in both of those practices that help bring sort of calmness and reflection to
Hmm.
your life? Because I think that that would be super helpful for so many people, women, men, anybody.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think morning practice is really important, where you don't just kind of reach for the phone. You kind of do some deep breaths. There's some practices that I do. It's actually just like kind of touching your heart, touching your neck. Just doing kind of some physical grounding things that are super helpful. Of course, writing to me is the number one way to be your own therapist because the process of writing is a process of discovery and unfolding. You don't know what's going to happen. There's no, um, it's like you're unraveling your insides. So I always encourage people in the morning. I don't know if you've heard of The Artist's Way. It's a
No.
book. Yeah, it's a book. It's called The Artist's Way, and she calls it morning pages. So every morning you just write and you don't lift your hand and you just write whatever is inside you and it just comes out on the page and there's no um, critique of it. There's no even looking back at it. It's just a process of releasing all your kind of inner turmoil, your thoughts for the day, and then you have a blank slate to kind of start the day. So I think those are some practices. Some other things that I really find useful is gathering with women. I find um, this to be so restorative and just so good for the soul. So gathering in a group, it could be around music, it could be around talking about menopause, it could be around a full moon, it could be all sorts of things, but kind of gathering and um, getting lit up by something besides worrying, your stress and all the worrying, and it kind of creates a whole other space for you to um, feel that spaciousness and feel less stressed.
Nora, you just mentioned music as well as
Yes.
something that like is really, I know, important to your life and a part of an integral part of your life. And um, the Threshold Singers, right? Is this
Yes.
the Threshold Singers of the East Bay, a choir that you formed? Can you tell us about that and how music plays into your life through that group in
Yeah,
particular?
sure, definitely. So I'll step back a little bit. Before the pandemic, both of my parents got sick. And that was another kind of pivotal moment for me because I was really, um, again, coming back to what's my purpose and how can I be of service to other people. So I started to become a patient advocate, which is, kind of helping people navigate the healthcare system, which I learned is much needed going through the healthcare system with my
Mhm.
parents. So I started doing that, and then I started to um, think about other ways that I could be of service. And one way is through music. I play the guitar and I sing, and I don't necessarily like to perform. I'm not a person who has a desire to like be on stage. Um, so there is a choir. It's called the Threshold Choir, and I didn't start it. It's a national group. There might be one near you actually. It's a group of women who get together and we learn songs. There's specific songs, very calming, very relaxing, and we sing at the bedside of people in hospice, people who are dying, and also the babies in the NICU. So on the threshold of life, it could be in either end. Um, and so that to me has been a way that I can feel like I'm using my gifts to help serve um, and people, and it's amazing because what I learned is it's not only for the person on hospice, it's for the people around them. Because as I think you both might know, the caregivers, it's so stressful to be a caregiver,
Mm.
so stressful to be a
Amazing.
family member. And so when you come in with an offering of music that's very calming and very relaxing, it's received in it's just a beautiful process for people. So that's been very meaningful for me and for the people we sing to, I hope.
I had never heard of that before. That's amazing. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's national. You said, they have chapters in different areas
yeah,
of the
I
country?
believe so. It started out
Wow.
here, and people start their own chapters in various places. It's totally free. It's volunteer. So we volunteer, and then if you call and want some singers, it's free.
I love
So
that.
yeah,
That is
yeah,
so beautiful. Um,
yeah,
so Nora, you've written your own books. We mentioned Women in Overdrive, and that's just one of a few books that you've written, but you've also helped other people tell their story, and that's through helping them write books and in other ways. Can you tell us why you sort of pivoted at one point to sort of helping others tell their stories through their books?
yeah, yeah. Of course. So, as I mentioned, my parents were both sick, and when they passed away, they actually both had writings. My mom wrote us all letters, so she had individual letters for my family members, and she actually called us into their room and read them to us, which was a wonderful experience. And the letters were about um, what she loved about us and the values she wanted to pass along. And my father wrote memoirs, so he has a book that he wrote, and they're stories of his life. It still makes me laugh. He has a story. Um, he told the story about when he was in basic training. He was always the last person to. He always got last in putting the gun together. There was like a timed, like a timed. My dad's kind of like an intellectual. He couldn't like get it, and he was always like, "I was always last." Um, and so he has these little stories. He took a guitar lesson with Peter from Peter, Paul, and Mary. He was very excited about that. So just these little anecdotes things written down. Um, so after they passed away, I started, people would, ask me and I'd say, yeah, I have these writings from my parents. And it was quite surprising how universal it was that people said, "Oh, you're so lucky. I wish I had that. I wish I did that. I started to do that. My mom has a drawer. She started a memoir. She doesn't know how to stop. My dad has photos here and this here, and we just can't get it together." So I really listened to that. I really listened to people, and I just saw like a need for that because um, I think, well, one thing people are afraid of writing. If you're not a writer, it's very intimidating to think about writing a book or think about how to kind of put the pieces together. So, to be honest, that was kind of the founding of Backstory. I just felt that there was a need and a desire for people to kind of capture their family histories and their life stories, and um, it's been amazing.
And so backstory, explain to me, are you
Hmm.
ghostwriting and helping them get this, story on paper? How does it work?
Yeah. So it's a very, I call it very human centered. So there's no
Okay.
technology involved. So what I do is I talk to people. So we set up a series of conversations, and it depends on the kind of book we decide on. So the first step would be getting together with them and asking them questions about what they want to tell. So some people really want to tell their family history, from um, I had a client who she grew up in Shanghai, and then she left during the Cultural Revolution, and then she started to, a new life in Canada. And so she wanted to tell that whole story from start to finish. That was very important to her. Some people have seminal events that they have been wanting to tell for so long. Um, I had a client who when she was 10, she came here from Sweden, and she took this boat ride, and the boat almost crashed, and she got here, so she wanted to tell the story from the boat ride to going back to Sweden 40 years later. So she had a theme, and that's what she wanted to write about. um, I had a client who just was a lawyer. He worked for the National Labor Relations Board, and he just wanted to tell his professional story, in the hopes that it could help younger attorneys in their journeys. I have people who, um, actually, after someone passes, I have people who come to me and they give me a bunch of letters, and they say, "This is my legacy book that I want to create for, you know, make a book out of, what these people have, um, what I've gathered that people said about my loved one." So there's a lot of different ways, and it's a very personal experience. So what I would do is kind of talk to them about which resonates with them, what stories they want to tell, and then we have conversations, and I kind of ask questions about, kind of keep them on track. um, yeah, and after that, I kind of go away, and I write a book, or I write whatever it is I'm writing. I come back, and in the meantime, they're gathering photos. So they have photos if they want photos included in the book. Um, and I have the book designed, and they kind of look at it and make sure it's what they want. And then they have a book, and then they save it, they send it, they use it for holidays, they send it to their family members. And so that's the process. It's very interesting because what I've learned is that there's the final book, which is, very everybody, loves the final book, but the process itself is so transformative for people.
How so? What have you heard from people that you've uh, done the books for, that you've
Yeah.
created these books for? What kind of feedback are you getting in terms of what it's meant to them, and specifically, what do you mean by the process is transformative?
Well, it's when you give somebody space and permission to tell their stories, they embrace it. And so it becomes a chance for them to really reflect on their lives and kind of put the pieces together, especially with someone guiding them in terms of finding themes and finding meaning, because everybody everybody's life matters, everybody's stories matter. Everybody has a story to tell. I have people who are just like, I had a client. She said, "Oh, nothing much happened in my life," and then we started talking. She revealed that during the Cold War, she was picked out of all these people to be like an ambassador to um, go to the Soviet Union and like represent the US. And she was like followed by the KGB, like all this crazy stuff. I was like, yeah, you have some stories to tell. So I think when you give people space to tell their stories, um, they um, they kind of make sense of their lives. I work with a lot of older people, and so giving them the chance to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, I think has been really meaningful for people. And the other thing that happens is that people really take it on. So if I'm working with someone, then they'll start to look through old photos, and they'll say, "Oh, I'll call my cousin in Maine. I haven't talked to her in a while." And then they call their cousin in Maine, and then they start remembering stories. And then so it kind of is a cascade of um, storytelling and remembering, and something that just wouldn't happen if they weren't going through the process.
So I think it's so interesting, and it makes sense to me that the people that are most likely to do this are older, right? Looking back on their
Yeah,
life. Do
yeah.
you think that there's any benefit for somebody a little bit younger who maybe midlife to do an
Mhm.
exercise like this that then sets the tone for the next phase of their life, what they've achieved so far and what they might want to look towards achieving in the next chapter?
Yes, completely. Yeah, I think that, um, like I said, when you give yourself space and time to reflect, it puts everything into context. So for somebody maybe in midlife, for them to be able to see, this is what I've done, these are the pivotal moments of my life. And I think it would help. It helps become more intentional about your future. Especially knowing, that we have a few decades left. We don't have very so I think, yeah, I think it creates kind of a roadmap. I mean, stories are roadmaps that they lead us where we wanna be, they lead us to where we wanna be. So, it's just another kind of step along that on that roadmap, and setting an intentional, um, setting some more intention around the next phase of life.
I love what Liz just said and your answer to it because we had a guest on recently who talked about her mom when our guest was quite young, 35, her mom got
Mhm,
Alzheimer's. She had got
mhm,
Alzheimer's and she, very quickly lost her memory. So if I'm seeing a scenario where if you start younger and start
mhm.
gathering this information younger, should something happen, you're not waiting till the end and you can kind of participate in telling the story of your life, and make it maybe
Yeah.
a communal or family thing. It sounds like there's a lot of ways to connect through doing that.
Yeah, I've had siblings, big families, siblings and big families kind of each tell a story in their own words, and that's a really cool thing to do. But getting back to your point, Michelle, you know, when people die, their stories too often die with them. And um, I think it's human nature to just never think it's going to happen to you. you know, I just think it's just you don't. I think that's a survival mechanism that you just never think that something's going to happen to you, and so I think capturing them along the way is a great idea. I mean, I tell people to record themselves. Record your family conversations whenever you can, just to have it, just to do that.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to people, so that if they went to you in the future, what should they be doing now that they might not be on their radar to prepare
hmm
for, the conversations you have with them later?
Yeah. I mean, I've always carried a notebook because you always think, "Oh, I'll remember that," but you never do. So I always recommend carrying a notebook and, just jotting down things. I think, um, people, again, with writing, people get very kind of stuck. They say, "Oh, well, I'm not a writer." So just, writing things down without any self-criticism or judgment. It's just like as kind of the facts, um, unfold. So I would say kind of just keep a journal, do some audio clips. And the same goes for your elders, the seniors in your life, as you know very well, Liz. Um,
Yeah.
kind of talk to them, talk to the seniors in your life, talk to the people that matter to you. Bring, your voice memo. It's your best resource in your pocket. And, your siblings, your brothers and your sisters. Um, yeah, I think documenting as much as you can along the way is super impactful.
It's interesting because I have had similar comments made to me that you've had, Nora,
Mhm.
where people will say, I really wish I had done
Yeah,
this with my dad. Or,
yeah,
um, it's interesting when before my mom passed away in her last, like, sort of round in the hospital, and she was still good and in good
yeah.
spirits. I took a video of her
Mhm.
having a conversation with my sister, and at the end of it, as she would always do, she said, "Oh, I love you." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, thank God I did that
Yeah. Yep.
because, I have that now forever, to go back and listen. Even if
Yes.
there was no book, I have that just personally."
Yes. Yes. That's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
so glad
Yeah.
you did that. It's wonderful. I
How do you
had a call. uh,
Oh, no, no, go ahead.
It just reminds me, in December, I got a call from someone who wanted to gift a backstory to their uncle. And we talked, and then I was going away. She was going away. And then she called me in January and she said, "Do you do obituaries?" And I said, "Well, not
Oh,
really." And he had died.
Oh my
uh,
So,
God.
yeah, yeah,
that is awful.
yeah.
Well, I know that, you're very human focused in creating these
hmm
stories. Um, do you do anything with AI in this regard or no?
Well, I do. I use AI as a tool, but
Mhm.
as you know, it will never replace human connection. So, for
Correct. Yeah.
me, yeah. So I think for me, the focus is really on the human connection and making sure that my clients do not need to use any technology, because especially the older clients, they're all at different levels. Some of them don't even have a computer. Some of them
Mhm.
are okay with it. Some of them don't want to be sitting, you know, trying to figure things out. So, um, I don't require any technology for them, and I do use AI transcription. So I have the when I started,
Mhm.
you'd have to send it out to the transcriber. So I do use things like that.
Yeah.
um, I do use AI as a tool. I think AI is wonderful for many, many things. But for this, when I, you know, my purpose and my vision is to always be connecting with people, and if that stops, then it's doing something wrong. But yeah.
You've had such foresight in so many things, sort of trends before they were
hmm
trends. And I
Yeah.
almost wonder if your foresight in human connection with
Yeah.
backstory
Yeah.
is really going to be the trend of the future in an AI world, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yes, totally, completely. I think I mean, I don't want to use, the word backlash comes to mind, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. But in terms of the deep longing for connection, for personal, storytelling, kind of, it goes back, right, to to
Mhm.
the fire, uh, sitting by the fire and telling stories. So I think you're absolutely right, Liz. I think
Yeah,
it's a great point to bring up, because I believe that it's true.
I agree. I
You know,
think
uh,
I think the future, the currency of the future is
mhm.
authenticity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
which is why, like, vinyl records are back, right? They're back in
Right.
action.
Yeah.
Let's go spin
Yeah.
some vinyl.
I think and I hope that people will really start to kind of understand and appreciate the benefits of storytelling, because I think it's instinctual to think about, oh yeah, they're good for you, but there's actually been a lot of research done on storytelling, um, and how family stories are good for resilience. They are good for health. They help to ground people in their um, family value system. And there's something called vicarious memories. And it's the idea that even if something didn't happen to you, it's a memory um, that you can take meaning and values from. So, an example would be I always tell my kids the story that when we were growing up, my parents would pay for the toll for the person behind us. I grew up in New Jersey, so there's a lot of tolls. So they'd always pay for the toll, and then we would wait and be like, "Can we pay for the toll?" So I tell that story, and then they tell it, and it's not something that happened to them, but telling that small story conveys values, right? It conveys the spirit of generosity. It conveys the value of giving, selfless, and all these values that are passed down through that little tiny story. So I think the benefits of seeing resilience in your ancestors and people that have come before you, they give you a sense like, hey, I they did that. I can make it through the pandemic. I have this inside me. I have this resilience. I have this, um, you know, this this spirit and these values. So I think that that's really important, and I hope that people will really start to kind of understand that more and more.
Yeah. Nora, resilience is a
Yes.
theme you keep speaking about, and in
Yes.
one of your blogs, you talked about seeing universal themes coming through in the stories that
Hmm.
you're hearing, as you're collecting them for others. So, what do you keep seeing in those themes, and what do you think that means about being human?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's such a good question, Michelle. I think when it comes down, we're all the same. We all want the same things. We all want to be loved. We all want to be safe. We all want to feel like we're part of something. So I think that those themes really come up, and the details are different. All these stories I hear, you know, so many different backgrounds and countries and people and all the historical things that have happened. But I think the themes of family, of safety, of love, um, of belonging are really the themes that come up, you know,
Yeah,
on
because
the larger scale.
I
Yeah,
always think when life is tough, like when you're back to speaking about women in overdrive, when you think life is
yeah,
tough and I'm so stressed and it's so hard and I've got work and there's
yeah.
kids and there's aging parents and I think we're probably at a time when it's the easiest it's ever been.
Right, exactly.
I literally I do think about like the
Right.
times when, it was if you look in the graveyards, there are a lot of
Yep.
young people in those graveyards that like we're very lucky to have science and stuff to be where we are now. But um, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
sort of 20 years after writing Women in Overdrive, are you seeing that we've made any progress? Between the stories that you hear, like what you were dealing with at that time and what you were trying to get to with that book and where you are now, like are we getting anywhere?
Well, I think, there's the personal. Are you talking about the personal level or like the cultural level?
Let's go both. Like first you, because you
Yeah.
you wrote all these things and you listened to all these stories. Like, has that impacted you, Nora? First,
Oh, yes. Listening to stories is profound. It's so impactful. Um, when you hear about the things that the ordinary, if you, the ordinary person that you see on the street, all the things that they have been through and that they have experienced that you would never know if you didn't sit down and talk to them, is amazing. Everybody has so many fascinating stories. So I think I've learned um, to not judge people basically by what I think they are in the beginning, and I think that's a really valuable lesson. I think I've learned just about I keep coming back to this idea of the process, like the process. One of the things that I uh, think about a lot is just the idea that um, like we are exactly where we're meant to be kind of thing. So it's like when you think about that and kind of the process of being within the process, like the messy middle. So I think about that in terms of um, people who are in the middle of the process and how, I always feel like I'm in the middle. I never get to the, I don't know where it all leads, but I think that that's something that is really profound. I think as a culture, I think there's definitely work work to be done, but I do think in terms of um, I know so many amazing, I have to say, women who are doing like really amazing things and really stepping in to their communities and into their work and into their purpose in a way that is really, really inspiring to me. Um, I'm part of a women's entrepreneur group that I started, and you know, I think people are really, people really are at our age are kind of stepping into their purpose in a way that's really profound.
I think that that is such a great comment, because I do think that sometimes we're so, as a culture, we're so focused on younger, right? You
Yeah.
know, and yet at this age, I think women have so much more agency
Yes.
and understanding of who they are and what they want and what feeds
Yes.
their soul.
Yes.
And so I feel like this is the age where all the goodness is going to happen, not the busy work, but all the, all the really good, interesting work.
Completely agree with you, Liz. I completely agree. We're at a stage where we've done the striving and we've done the, second guessing and we've done all that stuff and we're wise and we know what we want and we are aligned with our purpose in a way that is really, really powerful. So I totally agree with you.
Mm.
It's exciting.
It
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah. It's very exciting.
So, Nora, if you wrote a
Yes.
legacy letter to your sons, you know,
Yes.
what's one thing you'd most want them to know about your life?
Hmm. Well, I'd want them to know that I went for things that I wanted out of life and that I felt that um I I would want them to feel agency over their life and feel like that they can make decisions and not just kind of go along with what people tell them to do or what is expected of them. I want them to be able to make intentional decisions based on what their intuition tells them and what they really, really want. I feel like that's something that I have done, and I would love for them to do that as well.
That's so sweet. I love that, Nora. That's what, like, it's again, you have this emotional intelligence. I think I certainly had it for as long as I've known you. It's like a beautiful thing to witness.
Oh,
And
thanks.
I think that's the storytelling sort of makes it, so clear. But you did mention that you think something very nourishing is gathering with women, right? And that you
Yes.
started an
Hmm.
entrepreneurs group.
Yes.
Is the entrepreneurs group just women as well?
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I started Backstory, I mean, as you both know, you're both so successful in business. I mean, it's hard. It's hard, you know,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
work and it's so much effort, and you have to just really believe in what you're doing and just it's so overwhelming. It can be really overwhelming. So I think it was that sense of overwhelm and I didn't want to feel like I was in it alone. And I over the years I just met these women. I have a friend who's doing coaching for divorced or co-parenting um, moms, and it's a real niche, but she's so, she went through it and she wants to help other people. Um, and I have a great designer who works with nonprofits, just all these people. And we're all kind of working on our own, trying to figure out how many, how many posts you do a week and, all of the things, the pricing and what is my friend calls it slaying the dragons of doubt. She calls it in terms of like, why am I doing this right? Why am I doing this one right? So all of those questions. And when we get together, it is so amazing because you just feel so validated and you feel so not alone and you feel like your struggles are universal or shared. They're shared struggles. And it buoys me. Gives me so much, it fires me up. It gets me so, excited and in terms of we help each other, we support each other. I think that's what women do for each other. We support each other and we don't, there's no competition and there's no weirdness. It's just full support and wanting each other to really succeed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's the secret sauce of women, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Totally, totally.
um,
Yeah.
and I love that there are all these groups like sort of bringing women together.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
I'm not sure that that always existed. Maybe it did, but it just seems like there's a proliferation of groups that women can get involved with, whether it's
Yeah.
the local yoga studio
Yep.
starts to create a community. I mean, there are just these pockets of
Yeah.
community everywhere, and I
Yeah.
feel like that is almost an antidote to the loneliness that people can feel through social media and things like that by getting out and in person and connecting.
Completely agree, Liz. I think it's so important. I think it's crucial. Um, and if wasn't one doesn't exist, then start your own, convene some
Exactly.
women. Yeah, I think that's great. I have a friend, she does a women's writing circle. So great. She reads a poem and then she takes a line from the poem as a launching off point. People write and then people read what they've written and it's so personal and vulnerable and amazing because when you let yourself be heard and vulnerable in that kind of space, it really unlocks a lot of um, interesting, positive results.
It's so cool because I'm sitting here like looking at the two of you and watching the two of you and listening to the
Yeah.
two of you, and there's your lives are so different on one, like your sort of backstories of your own lives are so different, but there's
Yeah.
so much similarity here too because
Yeah.
not only like the women's group and starting a group for women entrepreneurs or executives or whatever, like with Liz Circle 200, with you with your group, but also Liz, helped her dad tell his story, and you
Yes.
help
Yes.
people tell your stories,
Mhm.
and that idea of wanting to create community and connection among women, right? Like on
Yeah. Yeah.
two different coasts, you do the same thing.
That's
Because
great.
to what you're saying, Nora, the group that Liz started, we did dine arounds, and we just had a get together recently. And I'm talking like we sat down and there was no small talk. It went
I
deep
love it.
so fast,
Love it.
It was so cool. I love it.
That's I love it. That's middle
Yeah.
age, right? You don't have
Yeah.
time for small talk
I
anymore.
was like, we gotta get to
Yeah,
it.
it's so
I
true.
know.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think Liz too, like I was thinking about what you do, and we both deal with people in transitions in a way, like with,
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
you dealing with family and I'm sure that you go through so many transitions with the people you work with and the families and kind of getting them at that moment and being there for them to support them. That's really powerful work
I
that's
love it.
important.
I have to
Yeah.
say, I do
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
And I so resonated with what you said earlier when you were taking care of your parents and the stress on caregivers, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's a real thing, and until you go through it, you don't realize how incredibly stressful it is. And um, I happen to be going through a situation right now with my dad, and it's Cinco de Mayo today, as we're
Yes.
recording this. And a couple of days ago, I texted one of my girlfriends and I said, we need to do Cinco de Mayo and you're going to host at your house because I don't have the bandwidth to do it, but I'll bring margaritas.
You'll show up. That's good. You'll show up.
And so 5 of us are getting together tonight to
Oh, that's
celebrate
so
Cinco
great.
de Mayo, and it really
That's
is
great.
just like that like refills the well of my soul
Yes.
when I am with
Mhm.
Yes.
women like that.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. That's completely well said. Yeah.
I love it.
It's
And
it's funny that you said that, Michelle, because I was thinking about your two backgrounds and how you guys have like, after listening to both of your backstories, how Michelle, you're so grounded in this place, and how Liz, you've lived all over the world, and how much you have in common. So it's funny that you said that because I had the same thought about you too.
oh, thank you.
No,
Um,
Yeah.
I know.
and you were saying transitions and just
Hmm.
so Liz helps people through financial transitions, but Nora, you spend a lot of time with people towards the end, right? Or like
Yeah.
late, let's say later in life even.
Yeah.
And so you're asking a lot of questions, and you once said you wished you asked your mom more questions,
Yeah.
What are the questions? Like what's one question you wish you asked or that you like to ask when you're talking to people later in life to get their stories out of them or that you wish you knew about your mom?
Well, for my mom, I feel like I don't know the details. Like I was writing about Mother's Day and I was thinking like I don't really know much about that day. Like what it was like from her experience. I know um we were living in New Jersey and they were determined because they were both New Yorkers. So they were determined that we would not give birth in New Jersey. She would not give birth in New Jersey. She just didn't she just wanted a New York baby. So they made this decision that they would have, I would go to New York Hospital, which is crazy. Like it's far, it's like going over the George Washington Bridge traffic. So, what was she thinking? Why did they make that decision? My dad always said that he was in the waiting room um, when all the other men, I was very unusual for that time. So I wish I knew the details. Like I wish I asked them what about that day and what it was like coming home with the newborn and the 4-year old at home and what their early life was like, kind of the details. I wish I knew more specifics about more about their inner lives, now that I'm older and I can understand.
I love that you're saying that. Literally, this
Yeah.
just happened. I went to my sister's house for dinner the other night, and she started talking about how my dad proposed to my mom. And I realized in that instant, I did not know, right? And she could have been making it up. I don't know, like, how my
Right.
mom and dad
Yeah.
proposed to each other. I know how they
Yeah.
met. I know my dad was 45 minutes late for his wedding, but I didn't know the story of the proposal. And then I suddenly wanted to ask my mom about it, and I couldn't, And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's why it's important to do
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying, because I would love to
Yeah.
like hear it
Yeah.
firsthand, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
It's just
sorry.
that's okay. No, it's all right. It's
Yeah.
like it just sort of puts an exclamation point on, like, it's important to start, and the earlier the better, and it
Yeah.
makes me wanna
Yeah.
start now too. Um,
Yeah.
so
I think
Nora,
for my
go ahead. No, go ahead. For your club, go ahead.
No, for the clients, you had asked also about the clients.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because, as you know, there's, nothing is really objective. Like everything is subjective. So when you start asking them about um, their stories, it's, especially if they're older, it's really about their legacy. So it's like, what story do you want to tell? Like, how do you want to frame your life that is
Yeah.
going to be kept and remembered and documented? Because it's kind of like this is it. This is the document. So I really try to kind of help them understand like what story they want to tell because there's a lot of ways you could go, and especially you know we have not made it this far without much grief and hardship and drama and trauma and sadness, and so how do you tell those stories? How do you make those stories um, really authentic and the things that you want to be passed down. So those are all kind of questions that I
Yeah.
try and get at with my clients.
I think that we had a guest on uh, little bit ago that her name was Cameron Huddleston, and
Hmm.
she wrote a book, also a writer. She wrote a book about getting all of your sort of financial and estate planning life
Hmm. Yeah.
organized.
Hmm.
And but at the end of her book, she put in sort of a postscript that while all of that is important, one of the most important things that you can do for your family is to share these stories,
Yeah.
um, because that is a true gift, and part of your
Hmm.
overall estate are these
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
And I think your business backstory just dovetails perfectly into that overarching, it's not just about the legal side of it and the
Right.
financial side of it. It's also about the history side of it. And you bring that to
Yeah.
families, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's like universal, there's, like you said, there's the transactional part, which is very important. Um, but there's also kind of the stories behind them and just something that you said is also important, which is like you have the personal history, but then you have all this rich history of everything else. Like your dad, like telling the story of his life is also telling the story of our country's history and of Vietnam and of all these other stories. So those are really important to save. That kind of historical documentation is super important
Mhm.
as well.
I when when my dad was in the war, the way they communicated back then, because they didn't, they couldn't do what they do today, but they used to mail audio tapes to each other, right?
Love it.
And they would record over the audio, because you're
Yeah.
frugal, right? So
Right.
you'd record over the
And do it.
audio tape that you got and all of that. But one of the audio tapes that survived, I listened to it, and it was my mother back in the States, you know, say, saying a letter to my dad. And it's so funny because in it she's like, I don't know, Bob. I guess Richard Nixon is guilty. The Watergate is all over. And she's going on about, at the time of
Amazing.
Watergate, what's going on in the country. And for me, as somebody that had only ever read about that history, I loved it.
That
That I could hear at the time what she was thinking.
right, right. That's so amazing. And it's so different than reading it in a book.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
yeah. I
So
just had
sweet.
a client who this was actually interesting. She had a family suitcase that someone was about to throw away, and she kind of saved it from the wreckage pile. And inside the suitcase was all this memorabilia about her uncle who had been shot down in World War II. He was a bombardier. He got shot
Oh,
down,
really?
and so his mother had saved all of this, like meticulously saved all of his stuff. And one of the things she said, so we used that suitcase as a opening for this story and what was inside and how it affected her life and her family's life. But one of the things that she said was this, will give my kids and my grandkids a chance to like really reflect on, um, war and what it was really like versus reading it in a history book, and that it's
Wow,
part of it's part of their history. And that's so important to save those things as well.
that's so awesome.
100%.
Yeah,
S-
yeah.
So, Nora, we could talk to you all day, and we want to. So let's just keep going another hour. No, but just a couple questions just to sort of bring it all together.
Yes.
You've talked, you've shared many resources throughout this
Yeah.
conversation. Are there any that
Hmm.
you haven't shared that you would want people to know? Because part of what we're doing with Spark Me is sharing resources that help others, right? So
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we can kind of collapse the time it
Yes.
takes to do things or learn faster. So what are some resources you
Yeah.
would want to share?
Yeah, so there's this something called it's called the Stanford Letter Project, and it's free, and you can go online, and they have kind of a form um, that is something that you can leave for your as part of your legacy, and it's called Dear Friends and Family. So it's like, dear friends and family, if you're reading this, I'm not here anymore. This is what has mattered most to me. I ask you, there's a section on that. There's a section on um, reflecting on the person you're writing to's accomplishments, and there's a section on gratitude, forgiveness. There's a section on, if they feel like they need to ask forgiveness for anything, and then a section on like thank you for. So it's kind of a form letter. So it's for people who, may not, you know, that it's overwhelming to do. So it's a very kind of clear way to write. So I would really recommend that. It's called the Stanford Letter Project.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And the final question that we ask everybody is if you could go back to your younger self at any time and give yourself advice, what would it be?
Oh, the advice would be, I think I said it earlier, you are exactly where you need to be. Uh, you're exactly where you should be. So I think that kind of addresses um, the idea of the process, that you're in the middle of the process and that's okay, even if you don't know why or what's happening. And it also addresses kind of like a deeper kind of faith in the whatever you believe in, God or the universe or there's something kind of greater guiding you, and then that kind of lets you just relax a little bit and have faith that things are unfolding that the way that the way they're meant to unfold. So I think that's good advice for a young person to kind of
It's,
rest in that.
it's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
I feel calmer and better just for having talked to you. This was amazing. Where can people find out more about Backstory and Nora Isaacs?
Oh yeah, so it's my website is www.whatsyourbackstory.com, and you can get a consultation. I'm working on Mother's Day now, and then the next would be July 4th. I always kind of, you know, work a little forward so people can have their gifts
Awesome.
on holidays. So you can find me there.
Nora, this has been such
Well,
an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's so
yes.
wonderful to talk to you guys. I really appreciate what you're doing. And the whole idea is so meaningful and just very moving. So, really appreciate you having me.
You have an amazing story, Nora. Thank you so much for sharing it with our listeners. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Thank you.